Alrighty, so I'm super excited to be doing this episode. This is going to be covering one of my favorite TV shows of all time, One Tree Hill. So Chad Michael Murray and James Lafferty, if I'm saying his last name correctly, they sat down for an interview with People magazine in 2025, which is super crazy. So if you're not familiar with One Tree Hill came out in 2003 and it ended in 2012, I believe. They had 9 seasons and it is the best basketball TV show of all time. So the fact that they sat down for an interview in 2025 to talk about One Tree Hill and not any new projects that they are working on is pretty crazy, and it speaks to how beloved this TV show is. Now, there's a few things that I think are leading up to this. So first, we had back in maybe 2012, between 2010 and 2012, you could watch reruns on like the soap channel or something like that, and then now we have it on streaming services, and I believe that it is on HBO Max currently. We also have Hillary, Sophia, and Bethany Joy Lenz. They were doing a podcast basically watching the episodes and talking about what was going on behind the scenes. I don't know the current state of that project right now, but that was a huge part of the revival of One Tree Hill, and I'm pretty sure that they started it because people kept talking about it, and so that's when you know that your TV show is really good, when people are still talking about it years and decades later. And the other thing that I think is leading to this revival of One Tree Hill is the fact that Chad Michael Murray is on Sullivan's Creek. He also did a reboot of Freaky Friday with Lindsay Lohan, and so that is just why his name is everywhere, and I think that that is also a big push for One Tree Hill and all of the conversations around it. And then you also had Hillary and Sophia talking about doing a reboot, but they seem to be leaving a few people out of the reboot, which is not going to go over well with me if NALEY is not involved in that project. This is Hey Britney. Welcome back. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get into it. If you're wondering why I'm doing this episode, if it's not clear already, I am a huge One Tree Hill fan. I do have my One Tree Hill sweatshirt on because that's just how much I love the TV show. And I also have my Binge Watch Britney podcast series, and I've been intending to do a episode on every single season of One Tree Hill, and I have not gotten around to it. But I do have a vertical video up just talking about One Tree Hill in general, and so I'm super excited that we get to sit down and cover this interview. And to really hit home the significance of One Tree Hill, before One Tree Hill came out, Dawson's Creek was the teenage drama TV show that everyone was talking about, but that was for people who were maybe 3 to 4 plus years older than me. When I was a freshman in high school in 2003, the seniors were talking about Dawson's Creek, right? And so it wasn't really, people my age could have been watching it, I just wasn't watching it. And then One Tree Hill came out, and this just seemed like the perfect TV show, especially because it was about basketball and I was playing basketball back then. Now, I do have to preface this by saying that the WB, they totally ruined teen drama when they merged with UPN to form the CW, and they have not recovered since. So obviously you can watch teen dramas on other platforms, but the WB in the early 2000s and the late 90s, that was where you watched all of your teen drama. That was what teenagers were turning to when they wanted to watch entertainment that was meant for them. And the CW still does it, but it doesn't have the same reach that the WB had. Alrighty, so let's get into my general thoughts of this interview. So I really love the way that they combined footage from the interview with footage from the TV show, because it was just really great to see those moments in the show again, because again, I really love One Tree Hill. Now, what I noticed with the interview title is that Chad Michael Murray is listed first, so he's kind of like first chair and James is second chair. I kind of have a bone to pick about that because I think that this is really James's show. He was there for all 9 seasons, so he should really be first chair. And if you're really thinking about it, this show is about basketball and music. It's not about basketball and books. And so there are a few things that kind of are said later on that kind of hint for me that this is James' show. But because Chad Michael Murray is a bigger name, that's why he's getting first chair. But yeah, so I just want to make that very clear. I do believe that this is James' show and he should be first chair for this interview. Now, they did bring up the original script and they talked about how it was going for like an 8 Mile vibe, and I wasn't really sure what they meant by that. Like, in terms of Lucas, was this supposed to be that he was from the wrong side of a track, he was getting in trouble, he didn't have anything going for him, and then he just joined the basketball team? Like, what was the actual direction of that whole 8 Mile vibe? But then I was also confused because in terms of 8 Mile and the movies that were made back then, those were a little bit more gritty and they were also filmed with a different camera. And what I want to point to is Law and Order SVU. Law and Order SVU, like the episodes from the 90s and late 90s, they look very different from the episodes made around maybe 2012 and on. It's brighter, it just looks completely different, and it doesn't give the show the same feel. For me, that was the case with the first 4 seasons of One Tree Hill, and then the last 5 seasons of One Tree Hill. Those were filmed, I think, with a different camera, which just made the show look entirely different. And then they were going for this energy of being intentionally funny instead of just letting the funny moments naturally happen because of the way that the script was written, and then also the characters bringing their own flair to their lines. So I'm not exactly sure what they mean by the 8 Mile line, but I do love the earlier seasons for how gritty they are, and they just feel more real life. I feel like I'm just watching somebody's life play out on screen versus feeling like I'm actually watching something that's fake and overproduced and overdone. That's what the last few seasons feel like because of that change in camera and that change in the show's vibe. So I do want to play a clip just very briefly of them talking about that 8 Mile vibe, just so that you can understand what they actually said in this interview.
Remember the process? It's funny because the original script, they were doing like an 8 Mile type vibe.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
They were going to kind of go with the 8 Mile thing, and then we kind of changed a little bit and went where the show went, which was ultimately the better choice. And originally, they'd called and said, hey, so we'd like you to play Nathan. You remember that, those days. But I had already kind of been Charlie Todd and Tristan DuGray, and I'd kind of done the bad boy thing. And I was looking forward to just kind of being the moral compass and trying to do something a little different. And so I said, I'd really like to play Lucas. So I remember Mark Schwann took me over to Toland's house and said, all right, we're going to play some one-on-one. If you pass this, you're going to get the gig. And I failed miserably.
Obviously. But anyway, so I want to speak to what he was saying about playing the bad boy. So this was my first kind of show that Chad Michael Murray was in. I didn't watch Gilmore Girls. I know he was supposed to be in the OC, but he turned that down to do One Tree Hill. And I can't think of the other show or movie. It might have been Freaky Friday. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't watch those, so I feel like this was my first exposure to Chad Michael Murray. So it wasn't that he was a no-name person or an unknown person. I wasn't drawn to this TV show because of him, if that makes sense. And so the fact that he's talking about wanting to play a different character, he was originally, I guess, pitched to be Nathan, who really is the lead in this project, and he wanted to go in a different direction and play Lucas so that he could be the moral compass, and we're going to get into that later. I don't really think that Lucas was the moral compass of this show, but anyway, so I think that is what is kind of planting the seed that this is really James's show. Like, if Lucas had been Nathan, if Chad had played Lucas, I think that he would have more claim to being like the lead actor in One Tree Hill, but I actually think that this is James' show, and it's because he played Nathan specifically. And then the other thing that they talked about was how James was like the closest in age to the characters of the show. I think he was actually 19 and the others were like in their early 20s. And so he was the younger person on the show. He was connected to Bethany Joy Lenz through her role as Haley, and she was a little bit older than him. And so he was more able to tap into that high school energy, and he would have been like fresher off of playing basketball in high school, if that makes sense. And so this just seemed like the perfect role for him, because I know that one of the biggest complaints about teen dramas from around this time period is that you have a bunch of older actors playing high school kids, and that doesn't always land as well, especially if the actors look their age or look older. Moving on, I want to talk about the Dawson's Creek connection, so we're going to start with a clip on that.
I mean, I remember initially the impact on me was that I was filming where Dawson's Creek was filming. And when we shot our pilot episode, they were shooting their final episode of their series. And I remember the transpo vans taking us through downtown, and the Dawson's Creek production was shooting downtown and I saw Katie Holmes and I was fully starstruck, like fully starstruck. And I just remember thinking, man, they've been here for 6 years. That is wild. I can't believe that. Like, it never even occurred to me in that moment that we would be there for anywhere near that long. So for me, it was really, really cool. And I grew to love the place. Absolutely. It became a little bubble in good and bad ways, but I think mostly good.
There's always something to shooting a show on location like that, right?
So where it cuts off is he's basically talking about how Wilmington is like the another character of the show. It adds to the show's charm, and I think that that's very true, especially when you have shows filmed in small towns like that, and you're really getting to see the town itself when they're filming in different locations. And it's almost the same thing with Sex and the City, with how New York City is like another character in that TV show. It adds to the charm, but I think Wilmington has a special place because Dawson's Creek was filmed there, and there are other shows that were also filmed there. But I feel like Wilmington, at least because I'm biased towards One Tree Hill, I feel like Wilmington is known for filming One Tree Hill instead of like Dawson's Creek or the other shows, because I think of the conventions and like the annual reunions and all of that stuff, I think that more is done for One Tree Hill than the other shows. And so I do think that the fact that it was filmed in Wilmington added to the show. But I'm sure there are other small towns that could have achieved the same effect, but the fact that this is by the water, this is a small town, it's in North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina, so I'm more particularly going to be drawn to TV shows and movies that are set in North Carolina, just because I really do appreciate having grown up in North Carolina once I moved to New York and then came back. But going back to what he was saying about Dawson's Creek, and so for me, this clip really highlights the passing of the torch. Like I mentioned in the intro, I did not really watch Dawson's Creek. I may have seen a few seconds of it when it was transitioning from ending that show and playing the show that would have come on right after it, but I did not watch the first maybe 2 seasons of Dawson's Creek until like 5 years ago. It really wasn't my thing. It wasn't something that I was into, and I really think that it was just an age thing. I just wasn't ready to watch that type of show yet, because I was watching like the Disney Channel, Degrassi, all of that stuff, right? I was watching other WB TV shows, and so this clip really signifies the passing of the torch. It's like the younger generation's turn, even though they're all pretty close in age, right? And so fun fact, there's actually actors from One Tree Hill who were on Dawson's Creek, and so that is just funny when you see the overlap, because I think Chad Michael Murray was in Dawson's Creek, Hillary Burton was in Dawson's Creek, and then I think there is a clip circulating of Mouth being in Dawson's Creek. I'm not 100% sure, but there's definitely a lot of overlap. And then also with how James was talking about how Dawson's Creek was there for 6 years, they were there for 9 years, and so when you're filming a long time like that with the same group of people, especially if you don't have people rotating in and out, like you're not changing the characters in the cast, it really does feel like a family. And so he was talking about how like when they get together, it feels like a class reunion or a high school reunion, because you've spent so much time with these people, you have actual relationships, and you're able to just pick up where you left off. And that's kind of the sad thing about it, because so much time has passed that it makes it harder for them to go back and do a reboot continuing from where the show left off. So they would have to do another time jump in order to do a reboot. But I do love the fact that they are actually a family, they are close and all of that stuff. It's almost like with Jersey Shore, how they stopped filming in 2012, I believe, and they picked up the cameras in 2018, and they're still hanging out and all of that stuff. I know people have their different opinions about that, but I would really love to see a One Tree Hill reboot, and I really do think that this is a passing of the torch. And I actually don't know, I guess All American would be the show that One Tree Hill passed this torch onto, even though All American probably didn't come out until 2018 and One Tree Hill ended maybe 2012, 2013, but I don't know who else they would have passed the torch onto in terms of teen dramas, and then specifically teen dramas about sports. And one thing I want to point to with the cast, so how I mentioned earlier, I think that Chad Michael Murray being a part of One Tree Hill helped, because he would have had a bigger name, even though I didn't really know about him. He would have drawn more attention to the show, but then also I didn't really know anybody else who was part of the show. And like Sophia Bush, she didn't really get big until doing One Tree Hill and then also doing Chicago PD. So that really just stepped up her game and helped her to avoid, in my opinion, being typecast. But for everybody else, I didn't really know them. I know that Hillary was a MTV VJ or something like that, but I did not know anybody else. And so I think that added to the charm, because when you have a bunch of well-known names who are part of a project, budget becomes the issue, money becomes the issue, ego becomes the issue, and so it makes it harder for something like this to run for a long time, especially when people want to move on and do other things. And you saw that with Vampire Diaries, where Nina wanted to leave after, I think, season 6 or something like that, and the show really had to pivot because she was the main character. So I don't think One Tree Hill, because again, I think that this is James's show, this is NALEY's show, I don't feel like One Tree Hill struggled for their identity or had an identity crisis once Hillary and Chad Michael Murray left the show. The point I was trying to make is that with these actors not being as well known, I think that allowed them to go the route of Degrassi, because Degrassi hired local kids to act in that TV show, and Degrassi, especially the generation with Drake, that show was huge. And that, I think, speaks to why this particular show is so big, because this is really your breakout role. There's not a whole lot of ego and budget stuff going on, even though some of that was happening behind the scenes. That allowed the show to just more naturally develop and really focused on the relationships between the characters and the storylines. Okay, so moving on, I want to talk about Chad Michael Murray playing basketball and having to train for this role. I didn't pull a clip on this, but obviously if you've seen the show, you know that he is not a good basketball player. He's like JV good, he's not varsity good, and then Nathan is varsity good, and he probably could have played D1 in college. I don't know what position he would have played because he is 6'2". So like in the show, he had to transition to playing point guard. He would have had to do something like that in real life as well. And so Chad Michael Murray, not a good basketball player. And I think that was part of the reason why it was better for him to play Lucas, because yes, Lucas was good, but he wasn't as good as Nathan. And so that allowed Nathan to shine more and to really take over as the lead of the show, because again, this is a basketball show. So if you're not good at basketball, the show in that sense shouldn't be focused around you, because it's not going to be believable. And what this makes me think of is the movie 17 again with Zac Efron, where he plays a basketball player and you can tell he's not good at it. And so that just ruins the show, because if the show is literally about basketball and the person can't play basketball, nobody's going to be inclined to watch it for that reason, unless your storyline and other parts of the show are really making up for the slack in basketball talent. And so this is why with Chad Michael Murray, you did see him have body doubles, and it's mainly when you see him supposedly doing whatever basketball move, but they're showing the back of his head and you just see some blonde guy, it's because it's not Chad Michael Murray doing that move. In my opinion, it's a body double. And so there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just, again, it's more believable when Nathan is playing because he actually is good at basketball. It makes more sense for the show to be centered around him and NALEY. Now, in terms of what made One Tree Hill really good, again, because this is a basketball show, it's really Nathan or James Lafferty and then Dan. And then there's also the fact that you do have Drano, who is from Sunset Park. He actually is a good basketball player, and I'm kind of disappointed that he didn't have a bigger role, considering how much they really needed to make sure that this was believable from a basketball standpoint. And so I think the fact that you had James or Nathan and Dan involved in this project, they were talking about how Dan played basketball, and I'm just going to actually play that clip so you can watch that first.
Expect plenty more of that at the father-son game, because we're going to crush you guys.
James Lafferty, the best basketball.
I will say,
Paul Johansson's good.
Paul Johansson played professionally. He was so good.
Did you ever play one-on-one?
He probably tried to get me to play one-on-one with him, but he was so much bigger than me.
So much bigger.
And still very athletic. There's no way I would have actually done it. I would have just been like, no, I'm good. I'm not trying to. No way, man. And it's wild to think that he was, what do you think he was? 35, 36?
He was 36, 37, yeah.
Wow.
When he started.
So I'm like easily 3 years older than him now than when he started.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. It's not true. There's no way I'm
full circle.
A decade older than.
Full circle.
None of us want you on the team, man. I don't want you. The guys don't want you.
He is exactly like season 1 early Nathan.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Pretty identical. Like if you were like, what's James? Like you ever see early One Tree Hill when Nathan was kind of a prick? Nailed it.
Yeah, full blown.
Kidding. No, guys, amazing, lovely. That's why they wanted him for Lucas.
I can describe Lucas in one word.
So that comment at the end confuses me because it says that's why they wanted him for Lucas. So if the storyline had been that Lucas was a better basketball player than Nathan, who would have been played by Chad Michael Murray, and they do a episode where they switch the positions and it's still Nathan who's better at basketball, like James Lafferty, however you say his last name, it's still him who is better at basketball for obvious reasons. So even if he had played Lucas, I think then it would have been Lucas's show, right? So I still think that in that sense, if we're talking about actors and basketball skills and the show, either way you slice it, whatever role he would have been playing, James Lafferty, if I'm saying his last name correctly, it would have been his show, regardless if he was Nathan or Lucas. And so I don't think it really matters what role he played. It just would have shifted the show in his direction or his favor in either role. So I don't think it really matters, but I am glad that he played Nathan because that just made for a better storyline. And then either way, he would have been with Haley and all of that stuff, right? And so I do think that Nathan was a better role for him and it was more believable because, yeah, it's just really hard to explain. Like, they could have obviously shifted things if he was Lucas and it would have been telling the same story with slightly different details, but Nathan was a better fit for James. And also I think with Paul Johannesson or Dan and Nathan or James being involved in this project, I think that the fact that they both play basketball, they understand what they're doing on the court, what they're talking about, that also made it more believable because really they're telling the story of an athlete's journey from high school, college, the pros, and all of that stuff. And you need people who understand what that process is like, what those tensions are like between child and parent when you're trying to make sure that your child makes it to the next level, right? And so you can kind of see, especially as an older person looking back or looking at this with fresh eyes, you can see why Dan acted the way that he does because that's very typical because you understand, especially if you didn't make it to the pros, you would have understood what you needed to do differently so that your kid can make it, right? And so in that perspective, I know that Dan obviously gets a bad rep throughout One Tree Hill and he makes up for it at the end, but I also think that he was very perfect for this show and really making sure that they lived up to what they were trying to tell in terms of a basketball player's journey. Now, it's crazy to think that Dan was 36 or 37 when he started filming the show, or Paul rather, and so I'm 36 as well, and I can't imagine having like a 15-year-old in high school who's going through all of this that they went through on the show, right? It seems like I'm too young for that. It's really weird, but it's also pretty crazy to see like how kind of young and how much of a baby he was in the sense of taking on this role and really kind of owning that role. Like, he is one of TV's greatest villains in my opinion, and he did that role so well to where a woman, I think he was out shopping or something like that, and he said that a woman came up and started hitting him with his handbag because he was so mean to Nathan and Lucas on the show, right? Like, not that she believed it, but he did his job so well that it just frustrates you in real life, right? And so that again just speaks to how well done the show was from a basketball perspective. Now, moving on, I want to talk about actors and characters blending and the moral compass of the show.
I remember not knowing anymore if the dialogue, written for Nathan was in like the cadence of my voice or if my voice had become the cadence of the way that Nathan spoke.
Right.
I used to be somebody. Haley, do you understand that? Do you understand what that means? I used to be Nathan Scott, and I was great.
That's part of what comes with being on a show that goes that long. And if you're lucky enough to experience something like that,
I want to pause it here because that's super interesting because I always thought of, especially when you do a show from a few seasons, that the actors can really kind of like weigh in and say like, hey, I know the character well, this is going to work or this isn't going to work, we need to change it. So I've heard stories like that where actors have made little changes like that and it just really improved the role or changed how that particular scene was received by the viewers, right? And so I do think it is important to talk about how you're allowed to bring bring your personal life, like your real life, into your character and kind of add those things, especially when you're doing something for a long period of time. And because you know how they talk about how there's method acting where you live out that character as your real life, and it's sometimes hard for actors to switch back to who they really are, like, and not continue playing that character. And so it is nice to see the reverse of where you can bring a little bit of your identity into the role, because sometimes there are people who are playing roles and I'm like, is that the actor just playing themselves, or are they actually playing a character? You know what I mean? So that's pretty cool.
Maybe you will in that way. But as far as like differences or similarities with the actual character, I mean, I think I was probably the most different from Nathan early on, you know, in those early seasons, and more similar to him later when he was much more mild mannered. But I did miss that. I missed the hot tempered. I was like, almost every season I would just wonder, like, where did that version of him go? Like, I want to see it every once in a while, or a little.
I want to pause it here because that's super important, because I think just before this, Chad was saying basically that I think James' actor was most like Nathan in the earlier season, and so he's coming here and he's saying, no, actually, I'm more like Nathan in the later seasons. I'm more mild-mannered, and I thought that was interesting. That makes me wonder which version of Chad Michael Murray is he? Is he the early Lucas who was the moral compass at some point and then kind of became like the bad boy, breaking girls' hearts and all of that stuff in the later season? So which one is he in that sense?
A little bit more, you know?
Right. And I remember the same for Lucas. I was like, dude, Lucas is always the moral compass of the show. Can we do something bad for once?
Yeah.
Can Lucas do something wrong,
Can
please?
he screw up? Like,
Love a Pete. Let me screw up and have some fun with it. And
okay, so the moral compass. So I don't think that Lucas is the moral compass of the show. Maybe in the first season he did seem like that, but as he got more popular and got more attention for playing basketball, especially with the whole love triangle with Peyton and Brooke, I do think that he kind of changed his principles a little bit. But I actually think that Haley is the moral compass of the show, and granted, she was super annoying at times because she would hold Nathan to this what felt like an impossible standard, and she just really wasn't understanding the nuances and the context of the situations that Nathan was in. So in that sense, she frustrated me a little bit with her expectations of Nathan, but I do think that she is a better person to say is the moral compass of the show. But I know that people do not like her because of, I think, season 2, when she went on that tour and she left Nathan brokenhearted and all of that stuff. Might have been season 3, I can't recall. But yeah, so I think she's a better fit for the moral compass of the show. And also too, I was not annoyed when I was watching this interview in real time, because this is actually my second watch. I watched it I left a comment on the video, so I watched it whenever that comment was posted. So that might have been like 5 days ago or something like that. But I was not annoyed when I watched it, but now I'm annoyed in talking about it, how much kind of like Chad Michael Murray is kind of like not necessarily inserting him into the show, but like constantly reminding you that he was there, especially with the way that he left and the fact that he did leave. And so again, I'm always going to push that this is James's show, this is NALEY's show, and I feel like Lucas and Peyton, they were just like side characters. They were important side characters, but they were not the main point of the show for me, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now, getting back to actors and the characters blending, so they talked about how Lucas became a writer because Chad Michael Murray was always writing. They talked about how James was a prick and annoying in the first or the earlier season. And I don't know if he was annoying, but he definitely was a prick, and that's just kind of like that athlete energy. And that's what made him more believable as a basketball player in the show. Because usually you think of star players, especially when they know they're really good, of being arrogant, of being stuck up, of being difficult to work with. You don't think of them being like this sweet innocent little boy or whatever, you know what I mean? And so that is why he did such a good job playing Nathan. Then they also talked about Chad Michael Murray's hair choices, and I did notice a few of the moments where he had the different hairstyles and all of that stuff. They showed the clip of him winning the championship, and I didn't think that his hair color was that bad. He did have longer hair in some seasons and it just looked weird, whatever, but I think that that the shaved head was his best look because it made me think of David Beckham when he buzzed his head, and then it was a big deal that he did that. So that was kind of the energy that he had in that clip. And then one other weird thing, and this is so obvious, but it's also a sore spot. So they talked about the actors and the characters blending in real life. We all know that Chad Michael Murray and Sophia Bush were married at some point, and then I think she also dated James as well. And so again, you're gonna see that play out in the storyline in some context, right? And I think that also happened with the Vampire Diaries as well, whereas Nina and Ian, they dated, and I think that kind of showed up in the storylines and all of that stuff. And so we don't need to spend too much time on that, but that obviously does impact the show, it does affect the show, and it does change how the storyline roll out. And then I do want to point out that I was saying that James was saying that he's more like Nathan in the later season. Chad does eventually at some point say that he's more like Lucas in the later season, but I do think that Lucas started the show as more of the moral compass, or more kind of by the book and more principled, and he kind of lost that a little bit as he went on. Okay, moving on, I want to talk about the best couple on the show, and then I also want to talk about the fact that we had NALEY getting married in high school.
Relationship with her. And so, the fact that it went the distance for the show and the fact that it went the distance for the fan base, yeah, I'm proud of it.
I love you, Haley.
I love you too. Who would you say is the stronger couple, Haley and Nathan or Peyton and Lucas?
Oh, here's where we are getting set up.
Yeah, that's a major fail. Is there a right answer?
No. It's hard to say. They both go the distance, right? Like, why?
Agreed.
Does there have to be...
Okay, pause it. There is only one right answer to this question, and it is that NALEY is the best couple. Like, hands down, it's not even a competition. NALEY is the best couple on the show, period.
I think, in my personal opinion, they're both star-crossed lovers, right? You got the whole thing going on there. She's my best friend. He's my brother. That's, the bad guy. You can't date my best friend. What are you doing? So there's that whole aspect of it. And like, you better take care of her to the end of time. And sure enough, he does. He's a man of his word, and it goes on forever. And the show literally revolves around NALEY when Leighton leaves. Like, that is the world.
Pause it. So right there, this is where I feel like he's kind of reminding you that he was on the show, because he says, it became about you guys when Hillary and I left, right? Like, it was always about NALEY, in my opinion, because I guess with Chad Michael Murray being in the top name or whatever, I feel like that's why he thinks it was his show. But in my opinion, it was really NALEY's show.
And then Peyton, from the pilot, it was that moment at the river court. And I said it a million times, and I'll say it again, when Luke looks at her. I mean, even as soon as she slams on the car brakes, and I'm standing there and I take the ear pods out. They're not ear pods. They don't exist back then.
We know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But when Luke looks at her and says, "I'll be seeing you," and there's that moment and it hangs out in the air, that moment right there, to me, summed up their relationship that it was always going to be. Does that make sense?
Okay, so what I want to say to that is because he's describing the scene in season 1 where he is basically dribbling his basketball in the street and whatever, and I think that's probably where they got the cut of him crossing the bridge from. But anyway, he is dribbling in the street, Peyton is digging around for a CD in the back, and then she sees him, has to slam on her brakes, and then she's just like, go, like, she's annoyed with him, right? And then he's just kind of like scoffing at her because she's being rude and not really acknowledging that she's in the wrong. She almost hit him, right? And so for me, there's nothing romantic or passionate about that scene. And so with him describing it as kind of like the moment that you knew that it was like it for them, or that you were rooting for them, whatever, I didn't feel like that in that moment. Obviously, because I've seen the show so many times, I know it's coming, but that scene didn't particularly do anything for me. And then there's also the scene where he says, "I'll be seeing you," and I believe that is a line from after he beats Nathan one-on-one for his spot on the team, basically. And then again, yeah, there's that build-up, but for me, I was not really feeling it the way I was feeling NALEY. And here's where I'll say that I am biased, because when One Tree Hill came out, I actually knew nothing about the show. I didn't even know that this was a thing, right? And so I was just changing the channels one day, and this was back in 2003, so you did have a printed TV guide to tell you what was coming on TV at certain times during the week, that sort of thing. And then there was also the TV guide on TV, so you didn't really know what was coming on unless you looked at the TV guide. And so I was just flipping through channels, and there had to have been a rerun, because it was like maybe around 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock when I saw this. So primetime TV shows wouldn't have come on that time, right? So anyway, I'm flipping through the channel, and I come across this scene where it's basically NALEY saying "I love you" for the first time on the park bench. Like, I had no idea what this show was about. I had no idea who these people were. That moment is what made me watch One Tree Hill going forward, and then just the fact that it was about basketball ended up being a plus, right? And so I don't think that it's basketball that's making me say that NALEY is the best couple in this show, or that this is their TV show. It's really that one moment. And so I don't know if I had seen the show in the order that was intended from like the opening scene on, if I would have felt differently. But I do feel like, because of my thoughts about basketball, that I kind of would have shifted a little bit towards the couple that I was kind of vibing with, and that would have been NALEY, right? And so for me, I think that moment that I described on the park bench saying "I love you" was stronger than the moments that Lucas pointed out for Peyton and Lucas. And I know that I said Lucas there when I meant Chad, but we'll let that go. Okay, so now I want to get into marriage. So I don't have a clip on this, but basically it broke my heart when James was saying that he didn't think that the marriage was going to last long, because obviously we know that their whole thing is always and forever, right? Like, you're supposed to believe that they're going to go the distance. So the fact that maybe it was even a question that they wouldn't go, like in terms of like the actors, that really broke my heart, because we do know that there's a scene where Haley goes on tour. Nathan is brokenhearted, especially because he turned down basketball for her. She comes back, he's not feeling her, he's being rude to her, and then eventually he sees that other people are kind of treating her rudely and all of that stuff, being mean to her, bullying her, and he doesn't like that, and so he sticks up for her a little bit more, and they kind of get back on track, right? And so I just love the fact that I lost my train of thought with what I was talking about, but I think we're talking about marriage. Cool. So I know that they had their ups and downs, especially in the later season, but I think that that's what makes the relationship stronger, because I don't really think that there was a true episode of him cheating on her. I know that she kissed the Tyler Hilton guy, and I guess you can say that's cheating, whatever, but they don't really have that in their relationship. It's more about their relationship with each other and them changing as people that they're dealing with. They're not dealing with craziness in terms of hooking up with other people, sleeping around, and all of that stuff. They're really just dealing with making their relationship work and figuring out everything as a team together. And the strongest scene of NALEY doing that is when you think that it's going to be a repeat of what Dan did, where Nathan announces that he's going to Duke, and instead of announcing that, he's like, "Hey, my wife is pregnant, Haley, I love you, it's gonna be fine," and whatever. And then he doesn't determine where he's gonna go or announce where he's going to go. They're gonna decide that together, because he doesn't want to be like Dan and leave Haley behind, leave his family behind. And so I think that was a very powerful moment, and it really speaks to the fact that their relationship and their marriage is going to work. And so yeah, it did just break my heart a little bit when James said that. Alrighty, so moving on, they talk about the craziest scene, and this is the scene where Dan is getting a new heart, and then the dog eats the heart at the hospital. And Chad was saying that he thought like this was done for like a promotional scene, and this was to make it onto the TV show The Stoop. And I can't even recall what they did, but basically either they did parodies or they did some silly, stupid stuff on The Stoop. I know what he's talking about. And so anyway, I can see what he's saying there, but this also speaks to the shift between the first 4 seasons and the last 5 seasons, because in the first 4 seasons, it was really gritty and serious, and if there was something funny happening, it was natural, whereas in the last 5 seasons, they were intentionally trying to be funny, they were trying to make you laugh, they were trying to tell jokes on purpose, and I didn't really like that, because it really changed the dynamic of the show. So I think that is what Chad is speaking about when he's talking about how they're trying to make it onto the soup, because they really did completely change the dynamic of the show. And in terms of that scene of the dog eating Dan's new heart, people have basically pointed out different bloopers or different kind of ridiculous moments that have happened in the show. And so we don't have to spend too much time on that, but I will say, regardless of all of the bloopers or kind of the weird things that didn't make sense, One Tree Hill is still my favorite TV show, hands down, and I would definitely watch it 1,000 times over, regardless of what people think didn't work or wasn't realistic or was ridiculous or anything like that. One Tree Hill truly was a great TV show, and it always will be. Alrighty, moving on to the theme song. So this was actually one of my favorite parts of the TV show, because the theme song of a TV show is super important because it sets the tone for the TV show. And back in the early 2000s, you had a theme song, but you also had like the credits to where you show the actor, the character they were playing, and all of that stuff, right? So it's like 20 to 30 seconds of them showing you who's on the show to some background music, right? And so you don't really see that anymore with TV shows, scripted TV shows especially. Now you just see a title card and like maybe 10 seconds of a song to really establish like the tone of a TV show. And so for One Tree Hill, what they did with their theme song was pretty common in the early 2000s, but the theme song that they chose was perfect for the show. And I was super upset when they removed that theme song after the time jump. I think it may have been season 6 actually, where they started not using that theme song. And so we can just go ahead and play a clip of them talking about the theme song.
It's a great song.
It's a great song.
That's what I think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can 100% see how people could get really tired of their own theme song for their show, or anybody could get tired of any theme song for any show because it's played so repetitively. But that song doesn't get old for me. It's a great song.
It's a great song. It's in the right genre for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like that it's got that rock edge to it, very alternative, kind of, teen angsty. I think I just reposted a thing that Hulu had posted, because the show's on Hulu if you want to stream it right now. And it said,
you need to go watch the show on Hulu or HBO Max right now if you want to watch it. And you can also, the theme song, there's different kind of postings on YouTube for it, like the original theme song with Gavin DeGraw. And then I'm also going to link a video of the theme songs from season 8 where they had different people singing the theme song.
name a better theme song. And I just don't think you can. I mean, there's a lot of great songs, right? You got like Cheers and Friends and Dawson's Creek. But that song was so pop culture that it plays everywhere, and it still does, And sometimes, which is the weirdest thing, do you ever like do a cross country trip or go into some grocery store and all of a sudden it plays and you're at the checkout line and you go, oh.
Yep.
So they're going to tell, James is going to tell a story of how he was filming somewhere and went into a bar to get a drink, and he was the only one in there, and they were playing the song because they knew it was him, they knew what show he was on and all of that stuff, right? And so I really do love moments like that where you can really see the impact and the influence that a TV show has, that you have people who know you for that role and they want to celebrate that moment with you. They appreciate the fact that you did the show and that the show means something to them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when they removed the theme song from the show and they just had that title card, that definitely ruined the show for me, even though I still watched it. And I think that the reason why they did that was because they wanted to show the characters growing up, and maybe they felt like the song didn't fit anymore. But the song always fits. You should always have that theme song associated with One Tree Hill. And so, moving into the covers for season 8, Laura Isabel, if I'm saying her last name correctly, she had the best cover. There's a 14-minute video of every single cover for season 8's intro, and a lot of them I didn't really like they were just off. They didn't capture the tone of a TV show, but Laura Isabel's song, it is perfect, and every time I listen to it, it just punches me. It just hits me in the chest, and for some reason it's very nostalgic, and it really reminds me hey, we're never going to be in this moment again. Like when you see the different moments playing on the TV show that are from the season, and I don't know, it's just it makes me very sad for some reason. Her song perfectly captures the theme, the purpose, and everything behind One Tree Hill. And so if it wasn't Gavin DeGraw's song, her song should be the theme song for One Tree Hill. And then moving on, they also talked about future endings of One Tree Hill. They talked about how it could have ended in season 4 when James and Chad Murray playing one-on-one, and they also talked about how it could have ended after season 6. Either way, I'm really glad that it went to season 9, and honestly, they should have showed Nathan in college so that we could have had 12 seasons instead of 9, but that's obviously not going to happen, right? But I'm just glad that they continued filming, especially after Chad and Hillary left, because the show wasn't really all about them, so they were able to keep going. Now, if there was a reboot, James broke my heart again when he was saying that he didn't know what else they had to tell. There's always something that you can tell when it comes to One Tree Hill. Like, you could just make up stuff and people will still support it because it's One Tree Hill, as long as it's like in that One Tree Hill universe, right? And so I think that there's plenty of stories that they could tell as older people, especially in 2025, completely different environment than 2003. And then also most people know that they are really kind of floating the idea of a next generation. A lot of people, myself included, really did want to see Jamie's journey on One Tree Hill, him going through everything in high school and all of that stuff. They could kind of still do that, but the guy who played Jamie in One Tree Hill, he wouldn't really be a part of that because you would need to find younger people, but the older people, they could still be involved in that. So I do think it makes sense to focus on the next generation if you're doing a reboot, but everybody from the original show needs to be involved, at least the main characters. There's no reason why you should do a One Tree Hill reboot without James, without Hillary, without Chad, without Sophia Bush, all of those people, right? Like, the main characters need to be involved in the reboot, in my opinion. Alrighty, so that's everything that we wanted to cover in this video. It truly was great watching this interview and diving back into the One Tree Hill universe. Let me know your thoughts on this interview, on this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.